The air over St. Lo hung thick with smoke and silence. It was the kind of silence that comes only after something terrible, like the battlefield itself was holding its breath. The wreck of an American M4 Sherman still burned on the hedgerow line, its turret peeled open like a crushed can. And somewhere out there, behind the fields of Normandy, a single German Tiger waited, its 88mm gun still warm, the air trembling from the echo of its last shot. Inside another Sherman, Sergeant Frank Novak pressed his gloved hand against the steel interior. The vibration from that distant gunfire felt like a heartbeat through metal. His crew looked at him, faces gray with fear, eyes reflecting the dim light that flickered through the periscope. The radio crackled, broken voices shouting positions, call signs, then static. "Jesus Christ, it's that Tiger again," muttered the loader, barely louder than a breath. Novak didn't answer. He knew it too well. They had seen it 2 hours earlier, a silhouette through the morning mist, almost elegant in the way it moved, deliberate, patient. The Tiger didn't need to hurry. It killed from over a mile away. The Sherman's 75mm gun might as well have been a pea shooter. Against the Tiger's front armor, it could only leave a scorch mark. And yet, orders were orders. The doctrine said, advance and engage. Straight at it. That doctrine had already gotten 11 tanks killed in 48 hours. Frank Novak had seen most of them burn. He'd seen friends, men he'd eaten with, joked with, fixed engines with back at the depot, turn into silhouettes of smoke inside steel coffins. And now his tank was next in line. He looked at his driver. "Keep low. Use the hedges. We're not giving him a clean shot." The driver nodded, engine grumbling. But deep down Novak knew, hedges wouldn't stop an 88. What could? The M4 Sherman was the workhorse of the Allied armored forces. Fast, reliable, easy to produce. But here, in the bocage of Normandy, that reliability had met its limit. The Tiger I was something else entirely. 60 tons of German engineering, with armor thick as faith and a gun that could tear through anything that moved. Where the Sherman needed to get within 300 yards to pierce its target, the Tiger could destroy it from 2,000. It was a duel already decided before the first shot. And yet, somehow, the war still demanded that Novak and his men drive forward. He'd been a factory mechanic before the war back in Detroit. He'd built tanks like this one, knew every weld, every bolt. But he also knew the weak points, the hidden flaws that no manual ever mentioned. Maybe he thought that's where the answer was hiding, not in the gun but in the geometry. He watched through the periscope as the Tiger's silhouette reappeared across the field. A faint flash, then a burst of light. A Sherman 50 yards to his left exploded, turret launching skyward like a toy. "Jesus! They got Miller's tank," shouted the loader. "Stay calm," Novak said, but his pulse raced. He knew something had to change. Not tomorrow. No. The radio crackled again. "Command says move up, keep pressure." Novak snapped it off. "Pressure?" he muttered. "Against that." He took a breath. His mind replayed the last few minutes like a film reel. How long it took the Tiger to turn its turret. How slow it tracked new targets. He had seen it. When it fired left, the barrel had to swing like a pendulum to the right before firing again. That was it. The Tiger's strength, its thick armor, its massive gun, was also its weakness. Was too heavy. Too slow to aim at more than one target at once. What if, Novak thought, we made it fight in 3 directions? His hands clenched. It was insane. It went against every piece of doctrine he'd been taught. But maybe that was the point. He flipped the radio back on. "Eagle lead to Red 2 and Red 3, listen up. We're not doing this by the book." The other Shermans on his flank answered, uncertain. Novak laid out his plan in short, sharp bursts, fast, impossible orders that no one in their right mind would follow. But the alternative was certain death. Red 2 front approach. Fire smoke, keep his optics blind. Red 3 swing wide left, flank him from the hedgerow gap. "I'll take right. Keep moving. Don't stop. He can't turn fast enough to track all of us." Silence. Then, "Copy that. Jesus Novak. You're out of your mind." "Maybe. But you want to live? Then move." The 3 Shermans burst from cover like charging bulls. Smoke rounds screamed through the air, detonating into thick gray plumes that rolled across the open field. The Tiger's gun barked again, a flash like lightning followed by thunder. The shell missed. Barely. Through the smoke, Novak's Sherman raced forward, engine roaring, suspension shaking as it cut through uneven ground. He could almost hear the German crew scrambling inside the Tiger, trying to rotate that monstrous turret. 30 seconds. That's how long it took for a full rotation. 30 seconds of blind vulnerability. The loader slammed another round into the breech. He loaded. Hold it, wait until we see his flank. Through the drifting smoke, the dark hull of the Tiger emerged. Novak's heart pounded. Now fire. The 75mm roared. The shell hit, right behind the Tiger's side armor. A spark, a puff of smoke, then fire. Hit. We got him, the gunner shouted. But Novak knew better. One hit didn't kill a Tiger. Load AP. Again. Another shell. Another blast. This time a fireball erupted from the engine deck. The Tiger's turret froze halfway through its turn. The machine, the monster, was dying. Inside Novak's tank, cheers filled the compartment. But Novak just stared through the periscope. The impossible had happened. And yet it didn't feel like victory. It felt like defiance. For the first time in weeks, an American crew had killed a Tiger head-on. And it wasn't because of superior firepower. It was because one man refused to obey a bad idea. That night, as the wrecks cooled under the Normandy sky, Novak sat on the hull of his Sherman, cigarette glowing faint in the dark. Around him the battlefield was quiet again, too quiet. He could still smell oil and steel. Burnt rubber. Human things turned to ash. Captain Morrison approached, hands in pockets, face unreadable. "Your plan," he said quietly, "wasn't in the manual." "No, sir." "It worked." Novak nodded. "We were lucky." Morrison looked at him long enough to tell it wasn't luck he meant. "You keep thinking like that," he said, "and we might just make it through this war." Novak didn't answer. He just stared out toward the black horizon, where the next Tiger might already be waiting. And somewhere in his mind he knew this wasn't over. He'd found something bigger than luck. A method. A pattern. A way to fight back. Because war wasn't won by the best machine. It was won by the man who could outthink it. If you're just joining us, subscribe to stay with the story. The war's most desperate invention was about to begin. The sun barely rose the next morning, filtered through a haze of smoke and dust that turned Normandy's hedgerows into shadows. Tanks lay twisted in the fields like broken statues of war. Somewhere behind the lines, the Tiger they'd destroyed still smoldered, a black monument to a miracle no one quite believed. Word spread fast. 3 Shermans had taken down a Tiger, and one of them was still alive to tell it. It sounded like a rumor, the kind of story soldiers made up to keep themselves sane. But when the recovery crews arrived and saw the wreck for themselves, holes burned clean through the side armor, they stopped doubting. Captain Morrison's tent was a storm of voices. Officers argued over maps, doctrine, and pride. "You're telling me this sergeant ignored orders, broke formation, and got his men killed?" One of them snapped. Morrison stood silent for a moment, then said quietly, "He didn't get them killed. He got them home." That silenced the room. When Novak was called in, he stood straight, mud still crusted on his uniform, the smell of smoke clinging to him like truth. Morrison didn't look angry, just tired. "You disobeyed direct orders," he said. Novak nodded once. "Yes, sir. The book got 11 tanks killed in 2 days. We couldn't afford to be number 12. The captain studied him. "So you made up your own doctrine?" "No, sir," Novak said. "Just fix the one we had." The silence stretched. Then Morrison's tone softened. "Explain it." Novak took a stick from the stove's embers and drew a crude map on the tent floor. 3 tanks. Angles. Arcs of fire. Timing. He spoke with the precision of a mechanic describing a machine that wasn't made of metal but of motion and timing. The Tiger's turret takes up to 60 seconds to turn full circle. Its optics are narrow. When it focuses front, its flanks are blind. So we don't hit its front. We make it chase the wrong target. Force it to move. And when it moves, we strike from the sides. Simple geometry, sir. Not heroics. The officers leaned in. Morrison finally said, "We'll call it what?" Novak hesitated. "Back home we used to call it a Texas two-step, 2 moves, 1 kill." Outside, the sound of distant shellfire rolled across the fields like thunder. The war didn't care about names. But now the men had one. And for the first time they had a plan that didn't feel like suicide. That evening, Novak sat with his crew beside their Sherman. The tank bore scars, dense soot bullet marks, but it lived. They passed around a canteen, silent except for the crackle of cooling metal. The driver, Henson, finally said, "You think command'll let us try that again?" Novak exhaled a slow breath. "If they don't, they'll keep dying the old way." He paused. "If they do, we might find a new one." A week later, word came down. Another Tiger had been sighted near Hill 192, cutting through the 29th Division's armored column like a reaper. Morrison found Novak at the motor pool, sleeves rolled up, grease on his hands. "You up for another dance?" he asked. Novak looked up from the open engine bay, eyes steady. "Always." By dawn, 3 Shermans rolled out under cover of mist. Novak's crew was in the lead again. The fields were silent except for the low hum of engines and the crunch of treads on damp soil. Through his periscope, Novak saw it, the dark outline motionless on the ridge. The Tiger's barrel faced east, waiting for victims. It hadn't seen them yet. "Red 2, take left flank through the orchard," Novak whispered into the radio. "Red 3, swing right behind the stone wall." "On my mark." "Copy that." The world narrowed to breath and timing. Every second mattered. The Tiger's commander, Oberleutnant Karl Brandt, sat inside his steel beast, scanning the horizon through his Zeiss optics. He was calm. Experienced. He'd fought in Kursk, where Shermans were tin toys compared to what the Soviets threw at him. But something felt wrong. Too quiet. Too still. Then he saw it, movement in the fog. One Sherman, front-facing. A decoy. He smiled coldly. "Fewer." The Tiger's gun thundered. The Sherman vanished in smoke, but it was only smoke. White plumes flooded the field, obscuring everything. "Now!" Novak barked. 2 Shermans burst from the flanks at full throttle. The Tiger began to rotate, the massive turret whining like a mechanical beast waking from sleep. But it was too slow. Novak's gunner lined up the sight. Target, flank, 800 yards. Fire. The round struck just above the track guard. Sparks. Smoke. The Tiger tried to turn. Another hit from the other Sherman tore into its side, flames licking the seams of armor. Inside, Brandt's crew shouted, panic cracking their discipline. He ordered the loader to fire again, but the shell jammed. Oil and fire filled the compartment. He knew it was over. He yelled for the hatch, smoke choking every word. When the blast came, it wasn't just the explosion of a tank. It was the sound of an idea dying, the idea that the Tiger was invincible. When the fire settled, Novak approached the wreck cautiously. From the side hatch, a figure crawled out, uniform blackened, hands raised. It was Brandt. Novak raised his pistol but then stopped. The man was no monster. Just another soldier staring into the same war from the other side. They took him prisoner. Brandt didn't resist. He looked at the burning hulk of his machine, then at Novak's tank and said in English barely audible, "Clever move. Not strength, speed." Novak didn't reply. Later that night, Brandt sat in a makeshift command tent, guarded, tired, eyes hollow. Morrison came in. "You're lucky to be alive," he said. Brandt nodded. "Luck is for gamblers. You have an engineer." He gestured toward Novak. "That man understands war the way I do. Machines obey geometry, not glory." Morrison frowned. "What are you saying?" Brandt leaned forward. "You're fighting Tigers the wrong way. You think they're walls. They're not. They're doors, slow doors. You just found the key." For a moment, no one spoke. Then Morrison turned to Novak. "You trust him?" Novak shrugged. "He just helped us write the next chapter." Somewhere outside, artillery thundered again as if the earth itself approved. That night, Novak and Brandt, enemies by fate, talked in fragments, about engines, optics, torque, gear ratios. The language of machines. They were 2 men who understood the same God, mechanical truth. Before dawn, Novak asked him quietly, "If you were me and there was another Tiger out there, what would you do?" Brandt thought for a moment. "Make him move. Make him choose. The Tiger kills what it can see. So don't let him see. Strike from shadow." Novak nodded slowly. The Texas two-step was evolving. The dance had a new rhythm now, one taught by the enemy himself. As the first light broke over the ruins of St. Lo, Novak climbed back into his tank. The war had changed again. And this time it was thinking faster than the manuals could be written. Because in this war, the difference between a hero and a corpse was one idea, and the courage to try it. Night fell like a curtain of ash over the Norman countryside. The front lines around St. Lo shifted hour by hour, villages won, lost, then reduced to rubble that no side could claim. Somewhere in that chaos, Sergeant Frank Novak sat on the glassy plate of his Sherman, the engine ticking as it cooled. Across the campfire, Captain Morrison studied the prisoner, Oberleutnant Karl Brandt. The German's uniform was torn, his face shadowed by exhaustion, but his eyes, sharp, analytical, never stopped moving. He was calculating something even now. Morrison broke the silence. "You understand you're a prisoner of war?" Brandt nodded. "Of course. But you don't need me as a prisoner. You need me as an engineer." Novak frowned. "We've got engineers." "Not ones who built the Tiger," Brandt said softly. He reached for the dirt with a stick, drawing a quick sketch. A rough silhouette of the Tiger's turret, the position of the ammunition racks, the optics, the fuel lines. His hand was steady, precise. "You're right about the turret speed. But you didn't know the gearing slows even more when the Tiger's angled uphill. If you catch it mid-turn on an incline, you'll have an extra 6 seconds before it can fire again." Morrison exchanged a glance with Novak. 6 seconds. In tank warfare, that was eternity. "What do you want in return?" Morrison asked. Brandt looked up. "Nothing. Just to end this stupidity. We built these machines to be perfect. They made us slaves to them instead." It was the kind of sentence Novak didn't expect from a German officer. Not arrogance. Not surrender. Just fatigue. The kind that eats through steel. By dawn, Morrison made a decision that would never appear in any official report. Brandt would not be sent to the rear. He would stay, under guard, and advise on the next engagement. No one outside the unit would ever know. It was treason by the book. Survival by necessity. That morning, word came in. A Tiger unit was moving through the hedgerows north of Le Desert. 2 tanks. One confirmed. The other unaccounted for. Novak looked at Brandt. "You know their playbook." The German nodded. "They'll ambush from elevation, wait until your column exposes its side. But they can't resist a stationary kill. They'll hold position too long. That's your opening." Morrison spread the map over the hood of a jeep. "Then we make them think we're blind." Novak's mind turned. 3 Shermans again, 1 as bait, 2 as hunters. But this time they'd use Brandt's own insight. Terrain, turret angle, visibility. He called it the long step. A refinement of his original 2-step maneuver. The bait tank would climb the slope slowly, draw fire, while the 2 flanking Shermans would stay hidden, waiting for the Tiger to commit. When it fired uphill, its turret and suspension would lock for a heartbeat, and in that heartbeat they would strike. By afternoon the plan was set. The fields north of Le Desert shimmered in the heat. Cicadas buzzed between the hedgerows, a sound too alive for what was coming. The Shermans moved under cover of dust, engines low, transmissions whining softly like growls. "Red 2 confirms smoke ready." "Ready." "Red 3 hold your mark until the Tiger bites." "Copy." Novak took a long breath. Through the periscope, he saw the ridgeline ahead, a patch of trees, a glint of sunlight. Then movement. The Tiger's barrel appeared first, sweeping the valley like a hunter's eye. Brandt, standing near Morrison with binoculars, whispered under his breath, "He's waiting for you." Novak's tank crawled forward into the open. The Tiger shifted slightly. A faint metallic creak. Then fire. The round screamed past, tearing through the earth a few feet to the left. The shockwave lifted the Sherman's front track clear off the ground. Hit the smoke. A thick wall of white rolled across the slope, and for a moment the world vanished. Novak's heart hammered against his ribs. "Now. Move. On both flanks 2 Shermans burst from cover. Their guns fired almost in sync, 2 streaks of orange flame cutting through the haze. The first shell struck the Tiger's turret ring, cracking the mechanism. The second tore through the side plate near the ammunition racks. A moment later, the Tiger erupted in a thunderclap of fire and smoke. When the smoke cleared, Novak's men cheered, but his eyes were already searching the treeline. Brandt's warning echoed, 2 Tigers. The second hadn't shown itself. Then, from the left ridge, another flash. Down. Reverse. Novak shouted. The shot hit Red 2 squarely. The explosion turned the tank into a blooming fireball, fragments of armor whistling through the air. Tiger on the left ridge. Morrison grabbed his radio, shouting coordinates to artillery. But Novak didn't wait. He knew the artillery would take minutes. He had seconds. He swung his Sherman through the hedgerow, the branches scraping like claws against the turret. He could see the second Tiger now, stationary, hulking, half-hidden behind a barn. It had the perfect line of fire. Loader, AP now. The loader slammed the shell in place. Range, 700. The gun barked. The shell hit the Tiger's mantlet, sparks bursting but no penetration. The Tiger turned toward him. Novak could see the barrel rotate, black and endless. He shouted into the radio, Red 3, flank hard left. Draw his turret. Copy. The other Sherman roared from the smoke, firing and moving. The Tiger's turret began to follow. Novak counted under his breath. 1, 2, 3, timing geometry speed. Now, fire again. The second shot hit lower, right at the seam where the side plate met the hull. A burst of flame. The Tiger halted. Smoke rose, thin and gray, then thick and black. Through the periscope, Novak watched the hatch open. A German tanker crawled out, coughing, blood streaking his sleeve. Brandt lowered his binoculars slowly. That one was Keller, he murmured. He trained under me. The field went silent except for the crackling of burning oil. When it was over, Morrison walked to where Brandt stood. The German's face was pale, unreadable. Morrison said quietly, "You just helped kill your own." Brandt looked at him. "No. I helped stop more of mine from dying for a machine." Novak stood beside his tank, helmet off, sweat running through the grime on his face. The victory felt hollow. Necessary but hollow. The Tiger's corpse smoldered a few hundred yards away, a beast slain, but at what cost? As night fell again, Novak sat alone on the turret, the air heavy with dust and gunpowder. He thought of the men who hadn't made it. Miller. Red 2's crew. The friends turned to shadows. He looked up at the faint stars. Somewhere above, the war seemed smaller. But down here, every decision weighed the size of a life. Brandt approached quietly, carrying a flask. "For the living," he said. Novak took it, drank, then asked, "You really think this ends soon?" Brandt looked out toward the horizon. "Wars end. Ideas don't. The Tigers will fall, but someone will build something worse. You'll have to outthink that too." Novak nodded slowly. "Then I guess we keep dancing." In the distance, artillery flashed again. The night trembled, and for a fleeting second, the field lit up, steel ghosts frozen in light. The sound faded into silence. The kind that comes only when the earth has had enough of men. And as the engines cooled, the truth of war settled in Frank Novak's bones. Survival was never luck. It was invention. Rain came with no warning. By dawn, the fields around Mortain were drowned in mist, the kind that swallowed sound and light until even tanks became ghosts. Novak's unit had been cut to 2 Shermans. Their third burned out somewhere behind the ridge the day before. Command called it a tactical delay. To the men inside, it felt like being forgotten. Captain Morrison leaned over the map in the back of a jeep, the paper soaked and tearing at the folds. "We hold here until the infantry regroup. That means no advances, no hunting." Novak nodded, though he didn't believe it. The enemy didn't wait for regrouping. He climbed back into his Sherman, the smell of oil and rain mixing into a heavy haze. In the distance, the engines of German armor echoed faintly, deep, deliberate, moving closer. He looked at his gunner. "Sounds like another Tiger." The gunner smirked. "You mean your Tiger?" Novak didn't answer. His mind was already running through possibilities: terrain, cover, range. Every rule of engagement drilled into him since training said don't fight a Tiger head-on. Every instinct he had left said he wouldn't have a choice. Morrison's voice cracked through the radio. "Recon confirms 2 heavies moving east through the valley. Probably Tigers. All units hold position." Brandt, still under guard but now trusted enough to stand beside Morrison, stepped forward. "They're probing. If you hold still, they'll find you. They'll fire from range before you can respond." Morrison glared at him. "You don't give orders here." Brandt's tone didn't change. "I'm not giving orders. I'm telling you how they think. They'll use the mist to mask their advance, fire blind, and wait for you to panic." Novak keyed his radio. "Then we flip it." "Explain." Novak's eyes were locked on the valley ahead. "Let them think we're the ones firing blind. He called it the deadlight maneuver. A trap born of exhaustion and instinct, the kind of tactic that made no sense on paper. They'd light up the fog with muzzle flashes from decoy fire, make the Tigers think they were seeing targets, and then when the German gunners adjusted for the false position, Novak's Sherman would strike from the flank through the blind side of the mist. It was madness, but it was all they had left. They positioned quickly, engines muffled, radios whispering. Brandt watched from the command jeep, rain dripping down his collar. "This will work only if they hesitate," he said quietly. "Tigers don't hesitate." Novak's voice crackled over the radio. "Then maybe they've never danced with ghosts." Minutes later, thunder rolled, not from the sky but from the valley below. The first Tiger fired. The shell ripped through the fog, hitting nothing but dirt. Another round followed, closer this time. The air shook. The ground trembled. The Shermans returned with decoy fire, short, sharp bursts aimed to confuse, flashes blooming in the mist like dying stars. Inside the Tiger, the German gunner cursed. "Multiple contacts, left ridge." The commander shouted back, "Traverse, 30 degrees fire." As the Tiger turned, Novak's tank broke from cover, crawling through a shallow gully. The mist was thick enough to hide him for a few more seconds. He could feel the weight of the engine, the rattle of tracks over wet stone. Loader, AP. Loaded. He aligned the gun through the periscope, could barely make out the Tiger's outline, a black monolith moving like a nightmare through white smoke. Fire. The shot cracked through the fog. The shell struck the Tiger low, glancing off. No penetration. Novak cursed. The Tiger turned toward him now, turret grinding. "Back her up." The Sherman reversed, mud flying, gears screaming. A second later, the Tiger's shell hit where Novak had been. Earth exploded, metal shards peppered the hull. "Loader, second shot, fast." "Ready?" He fired again. The shell hit the Tiger's side armor, at the same weakened seam he'd learned from Brandt's sketches. This time it bit. A plume of black smoke erupted, followed by orange fire licking through the fog. The second Tiger opened fire immediately, its shell tearing across the field. Red 3 was hit square in the hull. The explosion was deafening, smoke, flames, screaming metal. Red 3's gone. Novak gritted his teeth. He could barely hear over the static. His own tank was half blind from the smoke. Through the haze, he caught sight of the second Tiger, moving fast, relentless, angling to ram through what was left of the cover. "Outflank him," Morrison shouted through the radio. "You've got one shot, Novak, make it count." Novak gunned the throttle. The Sherman roared, slipping through mud and fire. He pushed it to the edge of control, tracks sliding sideways on the incline. The Tiger appeared through the smoke, massive, unstoppable. Its cannon swung toward him. Novak aimed for the gap between two ruined barns, barely wide enough. Loader, last shell. Loaded. Range, 500. The Tiger fired. The round tore through the air, missed by inches. Novak didn't stop. He lined up his shot, heart hammering, the world narrowing into the crosshairs. Now. The gun fired. The shell slammed into the Tiger's lower glacis, right under the gun mount. For a second, nothing. Then a deep metallic groan, followed by a blast that split the mist open. The Tiger's hull cracked in two, fire spilling out like liquid metal. The shockwave hit Novak's Sherman head-on, shattering glass, rocking the tank back. Silence followed. Only rain and the ticking of metal cooling. He sat still, breathing hard. "Target neutralized," he said quietly. Static crackled back. Morrison's voice was low. "Copy that, Red 1." Novak opened the hatch and climbed out. The world was gray, smoke and fog blending until there was no line between heaven and earth. The Tiger burned behind him, its outline dissolving into the mist. Brandt walked up through the mud, cuffs loose, face streaked with rain. He stared at the wreck. "You did it?" he said softly. Novak looked at him. "We did it." Brandt nodded once. "Then it's over." Novak shook his head. "No. It's just quieter now." The rain fell harder, washing soot into the soil. Morrison approached, exhaustion etched deep in his face. "Command wants a report. They're calling it a successful delay action." Novak laughed, a hollow sound. "Delay action. Yeah." He looked at his tank, scarred, smoking, barely alive, and then at the black shape of the Tiger burning in the valley. Machines fighting machines, both built by men who thought they understood control. He turned back toward the mist. Somewhere beyond it, artillery thundered again. And in that sound, Novak heard the truth he'd been running from since North Africa. War didn't reward bravery. It rewarded adaptation. He lit a cigarette, the flame trembling in the wind. "Come on," he said to the crew. "Let's go find the next fight." Behind them, the Tiger collapsed in on itself, fire hissing as rain claimed the last of its heat. The field was silent again except for the whisper of steam, like the breath of a dying giant. The rain didn't stop for 3 days. It carved trenches through the soil where men had died, washed soot into the rivers that ran red, and silenced what was left of the fields around Mortain. By the time the clouds lifted, the world had changed again, quiet, colorless, and exhausted. The Tigers were gone. The Shermans were ghosts. Frank Novak sat on the turret of his battered M4, the barrel blackened and bent from overuse. The war was still moving east, crawling toward Germany like a fever that refused to break. Behind him, Captain Morrison read orders in a tired monotone. "New coordinates, new objectives, new enemies." "Headquarters says we move at dawn," Morrison said. Novak nodded. "They said that yesterday." Morrison folded the paper and tucked it away. "They'll keep saying it until there's no one left to move." The wind carried the smell of diesel and rain-soaked metal. Novak lit another cigarette, his hands trembling slightly. Around him, crews were repairing what they could, patching armor with scavenged plates, painting names over scorched steel. The tanks looked like survivors of another species, half dead but still breathing. Brandt stood beside the Sherman, his uniform stripped of insignia. For the first time since his capture, he wasn't under guard. He looked east toward the low clouds gathering over the horizon. "You've learned faster than any army I've seen," he said. Novak gave a dry laugh. "We had good teachers." Brandt didn't smile. "You're not like them. You fight with instinct, not pride. That's why you won." Novak looked down at him. "Nobody wins out here." The two men stood in silence. In the distance, artillery rumbled again, soft, almost ceremonial, like thunder rolling across a dying sky. Later that evening, Novak climbed back into the Sherman's turret. The crew was asleep, the engine silent. He closed his eyes and listened to the faint ticking of metal cooling, the same sound he'd heard after every battle since Normandy. Each tick was a heartbeat. Each one could stop at any moment. He thought about the Tigers. About the men inside them. About Brandt's eyes when he saw his own machine burning. They were soldiers, both of them. But somewhere between orders and survival, something human had been lost. Something that no victory could give back. He whispered to himself, "We turned machines into gods." Dawn came with a thin mist. The kind that blurred the horizon until you couldn't tell where the earth ended and the sky began. The column started moving east again, Shermans clattering down broken roads, their tracks grinding over the bones of old battles. Villages passed in silence, windows shattered, walls painted with smoke. Morrison rode in the lead jeep, eyes sunken, voice hoarse from too many days without sleep. "Paris is behind us. The Siegfried Line's next." No one answered. The radios were mostly static now. The closer they got to Germany, the less anyone wanted to talk. By midday they reached the outskirts of a forest, dense, dark, and impossibly still. The kind of silence that feels wrong. Scouts reported no movement, no resistance. Command called it a low-risk corridor. Novak didn't buy it. He stopped his Sherman at the edge of the tree line, scanning the shadows. "Hold here." The driver frowned. "Orders say push through." "Orders don't see ambushes," Novak said quietly. He stepped out, the ground soft beneath his boots. Every sound, the creak of branches, the crack of mud, felt like a whisper from something buried. He walked ahead, rifle in hand. Then he saw it. Half hidden under a collapsed pine was the rusted shell of a Tiger. Its turret was twisted, the barrel broken. Moss crawled up the sides like veins. A bird perched where the commander's hatch used to be. Novak walked closer, resting a hand on the cold steel. The armor still bore the scars of shell impacts, his kind of impacts. On the side, faint but still legible, the German number 231. He froze. That was Brandt's tank. The first one. He climbed onto the hull, brushing away dirt and ash. Inside the commander's cupola, a burned-out helmet still rested on the seat. He sat there for a long time, staring into the empty chamber. War turned men into weapons and weapons into memories. But even here, even now, the machine seemed to whisper back. It wasn't rage. It wasn't pride. It was something closer to regret. Morrison's voice broke the silence through the radio. Red 1 report. Novak keyed the mic. Nothing here. Just ghosts. He climbed down and looked east again. The sun was breaking through the clouds, thin rays slicing across the forest. For the first time in weeks he saw color again, green, gold, the faint shimmer of life coming back. Brant walked up behind him. You found it? Novak nodded. Yeah. Or it found me. Brant looked at the tiger for a long moment. Do you hate it? Novak exhaled smoke. No. But I hate what it made us become. Brant's eyes stayed on the wreck. Machines don't choose their masters. Novak looked at him, then back at the forest. Neither do soldiers. For a long time neither spoke. Then Morrison called for the column to move. The war wasn't over. Orders were orders. As the engines roared back to life, Novak gave the tiger one last look. The sunlight caught the edges of its armor, turning it almost beautiful for a moment, like a monument to something lost. He climbed back into his Sherman. The engine rumbled awake, trembling like a heart trying to start again. Driver, he said quietly. Let's go home. The tank rolled forward, treads crushing branches and mud. Behind them, the forest closed in again, swallowing the tiger whole. As they moved east, Novak's voice echoed in his head, the same one that had guided him since St. Lo, through fire and smoke and rain. It wasn't the strongest who survived. It was the ones who adapted. The horizon glowed orange, not from fire this time, but from sunrise. And somewhere in that fragile light, amid the rumble of engines and the ghosts of machines that once ruled the earth, Frank Novak finally understood what every soldier eventually learns. Victory isn't about who kills the most. It's about who remembers why they had to. The wind carried the sound of the Shermans fading into the distance. Metal, men, and memory, rolling toward the end of a war that had already taken too much. He closed his eyes for a moment, letting the hum of the engine drown out the world. Then, almost as if speaking to himself, he whispered, If you want to know who won this war, just listen to what's left. The camera would pull back, wide, silent, endless. The battlefield stretching to the horizon. The burnt skeleton of the tiger half buried in mud. The Sherman crawling east under a rising sun. The final shot lingers, long enough for the audience to feel both triumph and loss, invention and guilt, survival and memory. And the narrator's voice, calm, reflective, human, breaks the silence one last time. In the end, war doesn't reward the strongest machine. It rewards the mind that dares to question, the man who adapts when everything else breaks. Frank Novak never became a hero. He became something rarer, proof that even in the darkest chaos, the smallest spark of reason can rewrite fate. A low rumble fades into the distance, engines merging with the wind. The screen darkens. And if you believe stories like this should never be forgotten, stay with us. There are more ghosts worth remembering. Fade to black.